Hello, this is Dan Baldwin, and today we have our how to buy, um, sell, and manage. And we're going to talk about SD-WAN today. And the title of our content piece is How to Connect Multiple Remote Office Cloud Networks via MPLS, VPN, and SD-WAN, or what we affectionately know as the cloud. To speak with us today, we have two SD-WAN subject matter experts, Brad Carroll with Strategic Telecom Partners out of Kansas City, Missouri, and Greg Ottensmeyer of Telephonet out of Baltimore, Maryland. Gentlemen, I appreciate your being with us. Before we start today, can you just give us a brief overview, 30 seconds, of how long you've been in the industry and what you do with your business? Brad, we'll go with you first.
Hi, Brad Carell, Strategic Telecom Partners. Been in the business since 2000. Worked directly for major telcos as well as major cable companies before becoming a carrier-neutral consultant. So more or less what we do is we go in and partner with IT departments and help them retrofit their entire environment.
Great. And Greg, tell us how you got in the business and how long you've been doing it.
Hi, Greg Ottensmeyer with Telephonet. 22 years operating Telephonet as its president. And we provide phone systems and bandwidth, full service, voice, data, and we specialize in ShoreTel.
Great, great. All right, well, we're moving on to connecting multiple locations. And before we get into the different technologies, MPLS, VPN, and SD-WAN, let's talk about what a multiple office is. I mean, if you only go to work in one place and you never work outside and you're not connecting anything outside, you're not really probably needing to connect multiple locations. Brad, where do people start when they're talking about connecting multiple locations and needing a VPN, SD-WAN, or MPLS, in your experience?
Well, usually we're running into people that have either a VPN set up that they're managing themselves or some version of carrier-managed IP VPN or MPLS. So the challenge today for them is to figure out how to take the next step, whether to go to an SD-WAN solution with 2 or more internet connections at each site, or whether or not to do a hybrid WAN and keep their MPLS in place and add a SD-WAN component with the internet connection as their second out.
Mm-hmm. And Greg, with your clients, I mean, how many connections are they needing when they start talking about VPN or SD-WAN? Is it just, a main office and a home office, or do they need 3 or more separate locations before they're really looking at these solutions?
Well, it's interesting. At least one SD-WAN provider says that they can improve services in a single location with a single broadband line.
Mm-hmm.
However, most people will benefit immensely by converting an MPLS or a VPN network to the new SD-WAN technology.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And connecting what to what, our second bullet point, we're talking servers. What sort of servers are these people connecting in the different locations, or are they connecting to things in the cloud that require the VPN and SD-WAN? Brad, we'll
Well,
start with you.
okay.
Well, it's really a custom mix depending on the customer and how many locations they have. Some customers, most of their traffic that they're trying to optimize is going back to one of their 2 host sites, either their primary production or their backup production. Or you have other customers that are trying to move more stuff to the cloud, and understanding that is the first part to trying to understand which SD-WAN or MPLS or VPN solution makes the most sense for them.
Great. And Greg, is your experience similar there?
Yes, SD-WAN is for the purpose of providing several things. Uh, Integration of multiple circuits, packet sharing, load balancing between those circuits, and then, of course, auto failover in the event that one of those circuits fail. They'll take over the duties of the other.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, let's go into a little bit of the history about how businesses have been connecting multiple locations. Now, my understanding is it started out with VPN, migrated to MPLS, and had lots of point-to-point in there. Can you share with us, Brad? Is this the migration that you've seen, VPN, MPLS, and point-to-point, and then into SD-WAN as the fourth iteration?
Yeah, I would say that's accurate. Point-to-points are still commonly used between data centers. Customers have in the past moved from VPNs towards MPLS and actually starting to see a trend back to VPNs as customers were taking the first step and move away from a one carrier approach. And then at this point, everyone is kind of taking their time to try to figure out which SD-WAN solution makes the most sense for their business. So there's a big transition going on.
Mm-hmm. And Greg, give us a little bit of background on the security, because a lot of people think, well, I'm connected to the internet. That means I'm connected to everything. But VPN, MPLS, and point-to-point, it really comes down to security, where it may or may not ever touch the internet. Can you explain how the security is really wrapped into these three products?
Well, with a VPN, you're tunneling a specific path within most probably a public circuit.
Mm-hmm.
And with MPLS, you're getting a private network that would be configured on a business point-to-point band in a specific network, generally with a single carrier provider, because it's the carrier provider's equipment, their routers that are tweaked
Mm-hmm.
to provide the private transmission of data between and among all the locations.
Now, and Brad, is this correct to say that point-to-point is the most secure? MPLS is probably the second most secure because it's almost a private network on a private carrier, and then the VPN is kind of mimicking that MPLS-like security, but it's using it over public internet circuits. Is that correct? Or what did I get wrong there?
Well, I think they're all pretty secure, and what a point-to-point is really varies a lot. A lot of providers are telling you they're providing a point-to-point, but if you dig into the weeds a little bit, it's really an E-line circuit that has a
Mm-hmm.
virtual component to it, and at that point, it's not really too much different than MPLS because it's going through the cloud, their internal cloud infrastructure. They're all secure. The difference is going to be, how many sites have an internet connection component. So
Mm-hmm.
if a VPN, MPLS, or point-to-point all lead back to one or two locations, then that's where you need to have one or two firewalls or a cloud-based firewall if it's an MPLS or VPN solution. One of the changes that people are working through now is when moving to an SD-WAN, they're going to need to firewall their endpoints, and that's a different challenge for them. So there's a real component there with with different providers, whether or not they're providing a basic firewall or a next-gen firewall inside their SD-WAN boxes at those endpoints.
Mm-hmm. And then, Greg, before we launch into the whole SD-WAN, if it's the same, better, or different, can you give us a little background when a client calls you and they have a multiple location application they're trying to connect all up? Does some situations that the customer have, will it drive them into a point-to-point or an MPLS or a VPN? Are there some customer challenges or application that automatically say, oh, VPN, or oh, point-to-point, or oh, MPLS?
Okay, good question. And Brad's right, and I'd like to illuminate that a little bit, particularly with the point-to-point connection. In the old days, it used to be two copper wires that were physically running between those two locations. But as Brad said today, it's all configured on the network through. I don't want to get too technical, but it's virtual.
Mm-hmm.
With an SD-WAN, and we should make clear at this point that SD-WAN is not going to replace a VPN or a MPLS or a point-to-point, but rather it may use those and other types of circuits, for instance, broadband type that are delivered on, fiber or cable business type services. So it's going to put all these this bandwidth together in a single box that and then mitigate or groom the data so that it is delivered in the most efficient manner.
Okay. And Brad, can you expand upon that? When a client calls you today or calls you tomorrow and says, I have this business problem or I have this new application and I want to make sure it's all connected correctly, will you automatically think VPN or MPLS or point-to-point and or SD-WAN layered over the top? How do you know what problems match up to what solutions, or are they all blended like you said?
Well, part of that is a conversation, trying to determine what they have now and where they want to go. So it's really custom. There's not really a standard recommendation everybody's getting. I still think point-to-point services, whether it's, depending on the customer's bandwidth needs, are the best way to connect two data centers together because it's low latency and helps keep their storage area networks running correctly or whatever they're doing to replicate data. But outside of that, like office connectivity, I think there's just a huge driver justification to stop using VPNs and MPLS and move towards an SD-WAN environment. And for most customers, that has to do with how big they are. Most of my customers have, more than 30 locations, with some of them with over 100, and for them, they're not ready to move away from MPLS yet. It's just not practical. They have to move slow. Smaller customers with a few sites on the ones I have, they're a lot easier to move to a full 2-internet SD-WAN solution now. It really just depends on how large they are and what makes the most sense for their, 2, 3, 4, 5-year plan, depending on what they're looking to do in the future.
Great. Well, Brad, I'm going to stick with you. Moving on to item number 6 here. We've alluded to it a little bit where we're talking about traffic shaping and we're talking about multiple internet connections and whether they're backup or they're working together in concert. Can you share with us now how SD-WAN is the same, better, or different than VPN, MPLS, and point-to-points, and talk about these 4 different types of SD-WAN that you helped define earlier?
Okay. Now that's where this conversation really gets fun. So, basically VPNs are protocol based, and they basically use the same protocol. It doesn't matter what underlying carriers you have or carrier you have. VPN is VPN. MPLS is also protocol based. You know what you're going to get. It's an MPLS network no matter what provider you go with. Point-to-points, you just have to dig through with the carriers to determine if they're actually giving you a private line that's a direct path between point A and point Z, or whether or not they're giving you a virtual circuit where, there's a middle mile there somewhere that's going through their cloud, self-healing architecture. Getting into which one's better really isn't related to this conversation. But SD-WAN, there's like 30 different flavors of SD-WAN. So what we're trying to do here is try to help explain that, because customers really get lost in this, especially with the traditional hardware vendors that they've been using for years, like a Riverbed or a Cisco or a Meraki that all have their flavors of it. They really have to take the time now to understand what the other options are, because there are some really, really strong players out there that are not the traditional gigantic hardware vendors that customers have been using their whole careers. So it kind of boils down to 4 different basic flavors of how to do it. There's path selection, which is accomplished a couple of different ways. It's really closer to what's been around for a long time with failover. Basically, there's a couple different ways that people do path selection. You're either defining by application whether it goes down one path or the other path if you have two circuits.
Mm-hmm.
Another one companies use is kind of a round-robin approach where they alternate what paths they go down, and that doesn't always work if one of the circuits is MPLS. That's more intended for a two internet connection type of situation.
Mm-hmm.
So path selection requires failover if one path is down. So it's pretty close, although a little better than what's been around for a long time. Then you get session selection, where basically the SD-WAN provider is determining per session which path it goes down, and then when the session's over and a new session starts, it determines again which path is better for that particular session.
Mm-hmm.
Then the third flavor is packet optimization, and that's different because the software in the devices or the firmware in the devices is making decisions on packet by packet or in groups of maybe 20 packets, depending on who the provider is, which path is the best one for each piece of traffic. And you can also optimize via application as well. So if you decide, hey, I want all my Netflix to go out the cable modem, you can do things like that. But in general, you optimize best by letting the software make all those decisions for you with application rules. So with all these, what they're trying to do is move away from having the customer have to worry about all the details and just get to application management.
Mm-hmm.
But those three different ways on how to do that really dictate a lot what kind of performance and uptime and reliability and redundancy someone's going to get out of their project. And then the last option is kind of an emerging one where there's at least one provider, Ariaka, who has what I'd call a cloud MPLS. What they're doing is they've got 23 global backbone nodes, and they basically do WAN optimization between those nodes. So it's the middle mile, which is the long part of a global network that they optimize.
Mm-hmm.
And then all the customer has to do, instead of buying a global MPLS network from one provider that may have expensive circuits in a lot of countries, they can have Ariaka do all the middle mile management, and then or somebody like Ariaka if there's others out there. And then all they have to do is get local internet connections for each of their endpoints. And the value to that is huge for customers that need that kind of infrastructure, because a lot of times their local office can get good tech support from, the only option might be a microwave ISP in the middle of this country. And having a carrier go through all their processes to get to that final last mile provider can be a real challenge.
And
so they're very different.
Right. Now, the vendors out there offering up SD-WAN, are they one of these four, or are they hybrids where they're offering multiples? What is your experience there?
I really can't think of anybody who falls into more than one of these categories. I could be wrong, but just trying to think through the list of 20 or so that I can think through, I can't think of anybody who falls into more than one of these categories. What we don't have right now is somebody who's doing packet optimization and WAN optimization in the traditional WAN optimization sense at the same time, because those kind of compete with each other.
Greg, now Brad has defined what he sees as these four different types of SD-WANs. Are those the same four that you're seeing in your experience, or are you seeing different ones?
Well, Brad did that very well, and I think his information pertains perhaps to larger networks, and there's a different segment of the market that are the smaller networks. Let's define them as having at least 2 locations and maybe up to 5 or 6 locations. One of the issues, and probably the driver, is that an MPLS circuit is going to run you $400 or $500, typically a T1 or bonded T1s up to 3 megabits. And at the same time, they're looking at cable-based FiOS type connections that are offering 100 or 150 megabits. Yes, they're asynchronous many times. And they're looking at prices of around $200, $250 a month. So they're wondering, how come I can buy a whole lot more bandwidth for half the price? And then they find out that there are some deficiencies with that bandwidth. For instance, when it goes down maybe they're not so timely reacting to repair that. Maybe that circuit's being shared among a community of users, and they'll notice more difficulty with that circuit.
Mm-hmm.
So SD-WAN plugs in very well for the smaller market, because you can use these cable-based huge bandwidth connections, and the SD-WAN will mitigate between the two
Mm-hmm.
and provide continuity of service.
And you're describing mostly the path selection, where you have a piece of gear, almost grooming or choosing between different paths for the smaller customer that can afford, like you said, a coax or a FiOS type connection.
Exactly. For
Right.
instance, here's the box here. This is an SD-WAN box. And typically an SD-WAN box is the inverse of a router. A router would have, one or two WAN connections and multiple LAN connections.
Mm-hmm.
An SD-WAN box would have maybe just one LAN connection and multiple WAN connections,
Mm-hmm.
because it's going to notice if the coax goes down, and it's going to put all the traffic over the FiOS. So where it's going to
Mm-hmm.
notice when voice or data is coming across the circuit, and it's going to optimize transmission based on the circuit that will provide the best performance.
Mm-hmm. Great. And that's awesome. That leads us into our seventh bullet point. When we're having the vendors talking to us about their SD-WAN magic, is it mostly hardware? Is it mostly software, carrier circuits? Where is the magic that people are really talking about? Brad,
Good question.
we'll start with you.
Yeah, that's the fun part, because everybody does call them magic boxes, which is hilarious, but that's kind of what they are. I mean, it's a mix of hardware, software, and firmware. Part of the magic is just the amount of simplicity that a customer can realize in their network infrastructure by making this change, because those magic boxes at the office endpoints are often replacing traditional, Cisco router. Well, I shouldn't say Cisco, but Cisco, Adtran, Juniper, whoever they're using. It replaces the router, replaces the need for a separate firewall appliance,
Mm-hmm.
and also replaces in some cases, a WAN optimization box. So the magic can, when those hardware refresh budgets, are made, you can literally knock those in half, or even 75%, and get a better solution than having all those separate appliances. So the magic is not just in the routing, which is what we've talked about mostly so far, but it's also in the simplifying the infrastructure and simplifying the ability to, with the hardware and the software, to do policy mapping for their applications.
Mm-hmm. And Greg, go ahead, Brad. Did you have something else?
Oh, I was just going to answer the rest of the question. I was going to say, I mean, I don't think there's a lot of magic in the carrier circuits, other than, it gives customers the option to use low-cost broadband,
Mm-hmm.
and get performance out of those circuits like they're used to with more of the dedicated MPLS type connections.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And Greg, you showed us that box, but when we're thinking about black boxes, we're really talking about some sort of decision-making software within the black box, right?
Yes, and within the cloud control of that particular SD-WAN provider.
Mm-hmm. So then we're talking about software, and it could be software that's at the edge, as they call it, in a premise-based piece of equipment, or software that's in the network, whether it's the carrier's network, or maybe the box vendor has something in the cloud that complements it. Is that correct, or is it only the
Well,
carriers that have the magic in the cloud?
no, it's like Brad said when he ticked off the various different methods. There are many different ways to configure a optimum solution for a client, and they all do things a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
And that's good, because it addresses different segments of the market. and different customer requirements. So right now, it is very much magic. In fact, I was told that they use WSFM technology in SD-WAN. That
WS.
stands for Weird Science and Frickin' Magic.
Right.
So consequently, they all consider it a secret,
Mm-hmm.
and they use their own secret technology that um, that they will tell you the effect, but maybe not want to share the minutia of
Mm-hmm.
exactly how they do it.
Great. Well, before we get into talking about the individual magicians, let's talk about bullet point 8. Is it really something that you can do yourself with generic components, or in the old days you could go to Radio Shack, buy all the pieces that you wanted, and invent your own magic? Is it something that you can do it yourself with generic components, Greg, or do you actually need these vendors to a large or small degree?
I'm interested to hear what Brad has to say about that, but I asked that question of many SD-WAN manufacturers and providers. And the
Mm-hmm.
question was, how long will it be before the customer can go to Radio Shack or, Best Buy and purchase a device that will do what SD-WAN does? You plug in a couple different connections and it'll auto configure, and there is no monthly fee associated with SD-WAN providers. And I think that's a question that's coming up a little later.
Mm-hmm. And Brad, what is your experience here? It kind of leads us into item number 9. Should in-house IT people or outsource MSPs be building these generic boxes, or do you have to stick with name brand components?
Yeah, I don't see how anybody could do it yourself right now, because the do-it-yourself approach would basically still be like active, passive failover, active, active failover. I mean, the software making these routing decisions, you need devices on both ends.
So, well, let's go into question number 10 because that's really what a lot of end users want to know. Are we talking, is it the solution mostly a CapEx or is it an OpEx? Am I going to solve it with a one-time capital equipment purchase of a lot of equipment, or am I really looking at a month-to-month utility? Which way do you see this going? Both ways, or is it starting one way or going someplace else, Greg?
All the SD-WAN solutions I've seen so far are operational expenses. They're monthly fees in which the provider would provide a variety of different services. Maybe they'll tweak, change some settings. They'll certainly monitor it for performance. Maybe they'll provide you with statistics. And certainly they should be talking to you about how to continually optimize your network.
Mm-hmm. Is that your experience, Brad? It's mostly turning into an OpEx as opposed to a CapEx, where people used to go out and buy a bunch of firewalls and VPN together.
Well, I'm actually seeing both kinds. There's definitely options out there that have a CapEx component, and
Mm-hmm.
then the OpEx would just be the license. And then even within those same vendors, sometimes they have an OpEx only model as well, depending if you want to rent the equipment instead of purchase it outright. So there's choices along those lines, depending on what the customer's preference is. And I'd like to answer the previous question a little better real quick. So one of the things in the previous question was, can an MSP do that? And the answer is yes, because some of the providers have an MSP model that
Mm-hmm.
lets them go in and resell if they want to own the billing to the customer. Typical situation like that might be a data center provider that has an in-depth managed services piece where they do consulting for customers. It's easy for them to go add the outsourced MSP model because they can just add the SD-WAN component to their
Mm-hmm.
portfolio of solutions.
So that leads into an important question. If a business end user is being offered a SD-WAN from their managed services provider on the MSP bill, would it be appropriate for them to ask which SD-WAN technology are you white labeling or rebilling? Is that something that a customer would expect the MSP to educate them about?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. haven't seen anybody try to yet. I haven't seen any MSPs, try to pass it off like it was their own product. Usually they're pushing that name brand out because customers recognize that SD-WAN name brand, and that's kind of the information that they're looking for.
Great. And Greg, are you seeing a lot of MSPs private label SD-WAN solutions?
Not as of yet, no. The other component is, of course, the circuits. So some MSPs are comfortable provisioning circuits, which is, what we do, and others are not. We work hand in hand with MSPs, and it seems largely that we're beginning to educate them about SD-WAN. So that's the current state that we see.
Great. Well, let's move on now into the part that most everybody wants most, and that's kind of going through the battle card. There's a whole lot of people out there talking SD-WAN. All you need is me, and they may be Googling the vendor name that they're perhaps about to sign a contract with, and they want to find out, are these friends, foes? Do I really put all of my eggs in one basket, or do I invariably need to pick a couple because they work together in complementary fashions? In no particular order, we've listed equipment and technology vendors for SD-WAN, and what I'd like to do is kind of take them, one or two at a time. Brad, we'll start with you. Tell us, what we need to know about Mushroom Networks, Teloip, and if you've had any business with them, and how you think they compare to any others on the list. And we'll kind of go down through these one pair by pair between the two of you.
Of the first couple that you mentioned, I'm not very familiar with those two. Mushroom Networks is one I've recently heard a little bit about, but I don't know enough to speak intelligently about that one or Teloip.
Greg, have you worked with any of the first two?
No.
All right. Well, let's move on to Cybera and Riverbed. Brad, do you have any interactions with them?
No, Cybera is another one I haven't run into, but Riverbed I definitely can talk about. So Riverbed has been, and I'll go out on a limb and say the undisputed heavyweight champion of WAN optimization for quite a while. Most of my large enterprise accounts have deployed Riverbed. What I think that customers out there need to do if they're considering adding Steel Connect to their existing deployment is, I realize that you've invested a lot into that deployment already, but you really need to do yourself a favor and take a look around. They're doing some interesting things with path selection, and a lot of what they're doing leverages their existing WAN optimization technology. There's arguments that can be made about, whether bandwidth is so cheap that, it doesn't matter. I think that, there's arguments that could be made back about reduced latency being very important, but some of the vendors that would be a good fit for a Riverbed customer would be somebody like Talari, who all the equipment would be on site, just like with Riverbed. And a lot of those customers have looked at Talari maybe 4 or 5 years ago and don't realize how much the price has dropped and the technology differences. I think it's definitely something that customers should spend some time reviewing if they're in those two. Don't just go with your existing vendor. You really need to weigh the pluses and minuses and look again.
And Greg, have you had experience similar or different to Cybera and Riverbed?
Yeah, we surveyed quite a few, and of course they're changing all the time. They're adding to it. We've looked at many of the carrier solutions, which is an easier way to do it. You don't get so intricately involved. But ultimately, I think you need to specialize in a couple of solutions as far as the boxes are concerned from, a MSP or a selling perspective, and then specialize in that. And those boxes should be able to provide a wide range of solutions. Now, then the carrier component, yes, the carriers provide circuits and they provide their version of SD-WAN that among equipment that they've selected and standardized on. So you know, they're two sides of the same coin. It's the circuits that you're going to plug into the SD-WAN box, and that box, the technology and things that it does. And they do the same thing for the most part, but many of them have, optimized or enhanced features. For instance, there's at least one that tackles it from the perspective of optimizing voice, VoIP, SIP transmission,
Mm-hmm.
because they consider that, one of the most important types of transmission that should receive priority, particularly when you're connecting a phone system among various different locations.
Right, right. All right, and then moving on to Ariaka and VeloCloud, Brad. It seems like every carrier out there is bragging about how they've adopted VeloCloud's SD-WAN technology, almost like they're the BroadSoft of SD-WAN. Have you had a lot of experience with those, either of these two vendors?
Yeah, so Ariaka was one that I described a little bit earlier as kind of a cloud MPLS play.
Mm-hmm.
They're fairly unique. You don't even need two circuits with them. What they're really trying to accomplish is for global networks, to optimize that middle mile, because global networks' biggest challenge is having high latency times between sites that are really far away. Think like U.S. and China, U.S.,
Right.
Japan,
Mm-hmm.
halfway across the world. And they focus on the middle mile and let customers buy at lower prices whatever the best internet connection is for the first mile closest to their endpoints. So they're kind of unique.
Mm-hmm.
They're not really competing with these other technologies. In my opinion, they're really competing for global networks that don't feel like they can get away from the MPLS model. They're giving them an option.
Mm-hmm.
VeloCloud is interesting. VeloCloud, regardless of what anybody thinks about the technology race, they're crushing the marketing race. Their name is out there everywhere. And there's three different kinds of experiences you can have with VeloCloud, in my opinion. There's two different carrier experiences, and then one is the MSP experience.
Mm-hmm.
So with VeloCloud, the carriers are all locking in. I'm just seeing them all the time. You're getting aggregators, you're getting major carriers. AT&T signed with them, Granite signed with them,
Mm-hmm.
Megapass signed with them,
Mm-hmm.
Sprint signed with them. I mean, just go on and on and on. But a lot of the carriers are trying to offer it as a managed service, and they don't want the customer to have full access to the orchestrator, which is the tool where you can go in and make changes yourself
Mm-hmm.
to applications. There's like a menu of like 2,400 applications and counting that you can make selections on to either shut off or go down multiple paths or a single path. And that's a really huge deal.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the carriers are only offering them web portal visibility, and you have to open a ticket to actually go in and make the change. And the reason why is, the carriers have not just large customers, but they also have a lot of SMB, smaller business customers. And they've found that those SMB customers might go in and accidentally shut off the network and then want an SLA credit. So what
Right.
they're doing is like I'm starting to see more and more of them offer 100% uptime SLA, which is, hey, that's better than 5 nines, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the 100% SLA, if you see that, you almost can be certain that you're not going to get to touch anything.
Right.
And that's valuable for some customers who don't really want to.
Mm-hmm.
But other customers really want to get in and play with it, and you don't want to be disappointed. So, but there are some carriers, and they tend to be not the major brands that are opening that up
Mm-hmm.
and maybe giving access to the most important stuff, but hiding the stuff the customer might break. And some are giving full access to the orchestrator. So I think that's the biggest thing to review if you're looking at purchasing this technology from VeloCloud through somebody you're getting circuits from. And then the third model is the MSP model. That in the carriers, what they're doing is they're putting instances of the VeloCloud technology in their data centers. So
Mm-hmm.
most of them might have 5 or 8 data centers that are lit
Mm-hmm.
at various points in the country, which is going to cover most people pretty good. The MSP model, also with VeloCloud, if the carriers are providing it, a lot of times the cloud-based, if you're following VeloCloud, they're launching things like cloud-based security,
Mm-hmm.
where you can pick from a menu. Well, if you're buying from a carrier, you're going to probably be using whatever security firewall that they use
Mm-hmm.
in the cloud. So you may not have access to that full menu. The MSP model allows MSPs to resell the entire VeloCloud portfolio through VeloCloud as a service, and VeloCloud is lit in over 80 different data centers, and they have that SD-WAN, software-defined security model where you can pick from Palo Alto or Fortinet. I think there's a couple others. So that's an evolving situation.
Mm-hmm.
One isn't necessarily better than the other. Like anything else, is customer specific. You have to kind of help guide your customer based on how much they want to get in and be able to control that themselves, and whether or not there's any benefit to having access to 80 instead of 8, cloud points that the VeloCloud solution is running through.
Great. And Greg, your experience with Ariaka and VeloCloud, is it similar to Brad's?
Well, in general, the reasons that different customers would gravitate towards the ability with an SD-WAN to have a portal to be able to look at circuit performance. For instance, with an MPLS network, it's carrier based, and you're not going to be able to make changes in classes of service without calling the carrier and doing it manually. With SD-WAN, you get a single look at all your circuits. Some customers just want to see statistics, maybe historical things, or even real-time activity on the circuits. That helps us with the ability to diagnose troubles and resolve them quickly. And then a customer may want to go in and look at how much when they had peak traffic. So they can do that themselves with an SD-WAN, where with some of the older solutions, you wouldn't be able to do that.
All right. And then moving on to Viptela and CloudGenix. Brad, are you are you working with them at all, or do you know much about them?
Yeah, so Viptela was very, very recently, in the last couple of weeks, acquired by Cisco, which I think kind of supports the idea that Cisco, IWAN, and Meraki's solution, they're looking to move away from path selection and get into more advanced routing through packet optimization. And I'm interested to see how that plays out. I think some of the other large name brand hardware vendors are probably going to be making acquisitions so they can catch up to where these other providers are right now. So we'll see how Viptela plays out as they get integrated with Cisco. CloudGenix is interesting. They're a newer player. They really focus on application-defined routing, and I believe that's session-based. They're an evolving provider, and I think they're definitely one that should be on customers' hit list to review. Just because their technology is getting a lot of attention right now.
Great. Greg, similar experiences with Viptela and CloudGenix?
No, Brad's the expert on that. We approach it two ways. Either we're going to manage it for the customer, or it's something that the customer wants to manage themselves. The larger network, they may tend towards the latter. So in that case, we would use one of the carrier solutions, which is our next topic of discussion.
Great. And then finally, Silver Peak, Talari, or any that we failed to mention, Brad. What do you want to share about Silver Peak, Talari, or any others?
Gotcha. Talari is one I have a lot of experience with. They have a packet optimization product. Some of the really cool things about them are they actually optimize every single packet, and a lot of people that say they optimize packets are not optimizing every single packet. It might be groups of packets. But every single pack is optimized for the first mile, middle mile, and last mile. And they've been doing this, I think, longer than anyone. They've got case studies with customers that have had solutions in place for 4 or 5 years, and there's probably not a lot of these other players that can say that. They've had a reputation for being overpriced in the past, but with the VeloCloud model and some of these other companies pushing that MRC model, they've come down a lot, and they're still competitive. I think that maybe their marketing isn't quite up to speed with some of the other players that have just exploded on the scene, but they've definitely got a great technology product. The other thing that's kind of unique about them, one thing to know about them is they have a fail-to-wire solution built into their boxes. So if a box dies on you, these become a single point of failure. So what each of these providers is trying to do, especially the MRC model ones, is they'll have a high availability model where you have an active passive setup. So if box 1 goes down, box 2 immediately gets running. Then they've got a lower cost cold spare model where you just have literally a cold spare and somebody has to physically go plug it in. Well, with the Tulare solution, you may not need that, because you could have the field-of-wire works like a pass-through switch. So at that point, maybe it just becomes one internet connection. It just becomes one MPLS connection. So you're not down. You're just losing the SD-WAN portion of the optimization for 24 hours until you get a replacement shipped out. Silver Peak, is one of the major vendors out there. I believe they do round robin routing. I've got to review that. I'll come back to that one.
Great. Any other vendors that we've left off this first list, Brad?
I think Versa Networks is one that should be added. Versa Networks is in with CenturyLink, and they've just Comcast has just announced SD-WAN beta, and they're using Versa. And Versa is a round robin type of approach where they just kind of like a hunt group, just round robin through. Other than that, I think you've covered all the major ones that I can think of.
Great. Greg, any experience with Silver Peak, Clarity, or Versa?
No, it's interesting that Comcast selected Versa, though. I was told they should have an SD-WAN product ready in about by the end of the year.
Now, interesting about Versa, Brad, tell me if you have heard this or not. When I was out at the CenturyLink event earlier this year in San Diego, and they announced that they had selected Versa over VeloCloud, a lot of people said, well, it's because Versa does really well on kind of the lower end, whereas VeloCloud is more of a higher end, more expensive solution. Is that a decent generalization, or is it much different than that?
That's interesting that they would say that. I almost think it'd be the opposite. I think what Versa has over VeloCloud is their endpoints they have next gen firewall capabilities built in versus basic. VeloCloud's endpoints are basic firewall, and just a quick, easy way to understand the difference. A basic firewall is what most people would expect, just stop stuff from coming in. Next gen firewall is what you get when you want deep packet inspection and some of those higher end security functions that your IT security staff member or consultant would want to get into. There's different ideas on if that matters or not to have next gen firewalls at the endpoints, but that's one thing that Versa has over. And CenturyLink and the big carriers are really big into the security piece. So that I don't know why they were selected, but that might be one reason, because that's an edge they have over some of the other options.
Great. Well, that kind of takes us into the final part of our presentation today. We've both talked about, or all of us have talked, or you've all both talked about how the vendors and then their master agencies are really taking SD-WAN out to the marketplace through their channel partners. In no particular order, we've listed both the carriers that may be doing Versa or VeloCloud or some other combination, and then the master agencies that are, championing these different solutions. Greg, since you stated earlier that you really lead with the carrier SD-WAN solutions, can you pick out some of these carriers that you're doing business with first, and let us know what your experiences have been with their SD-WAN solutions?
Well, from my perspective, you can put them all in a box.
Mm-hmm.
They each provide their own SD-WAN solution. They're going to provision it and manage it. So from a agency point of view, that's a solution you can provide, and maybe it's pretty much hands off.
Mm-hmm.
If you're dealing with a client and providing a more full service personal solution, then we would provision the box that we support and manage that for the client while allowing them to have access. One good point about SD-WAN when we're converting from MPLS to an SD-WAN solution is that no, the larger customers are not going to jump over to SD-WAN,
Mm-hmm.
all at once. But the SD-WAN provides a solution, a vehicle for them to actually connect an MPLS circuit that they rely on into a SD-WAN, whether it be a trial solution or a solution that is used to add new locations that would typically you would order an additional MPLS, and you can still put everything on one network using that solution. So that's a good migration path for
Mm-hmm.
larger clients that are looking to transition.
Okay. And Brad, do you have any SD-WAN integration experience with any of the carrier vendors?
Yeah, I think, like you said, a lot of them you can put in a box. For me, putting them in a box is, separating the ones that that do not allow access via direct access to the orchestrator tools.
Mm-hmm.
A couple that do would be Mettel.
Mm-hmm.
As a managed service, they give full co-management access. Earthlink was one that started off with not allowing access because of the SMB situation where customer might accidentally shut off their own network.
Mm-hmm.
But they've started to turn back the other direction and allow access to the tools that the customers really want to get access to, but still
Mm-hmm.
keep something that may be a little bit more dangerous, from a setting standpoint, locked down via a trouble ticket.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Earthlink is, part of Windstream now. I think Windstream's adopting the Earthlink solution. It's a little hard to tell, but eventually I think that'll be one conversation with the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
I know Windstream's current version, they don't allow customers to have access to the orchestrator.
Mm-hmm.
Looking on here, I know Granite. See, you've got Megapath on here.
We need to add Granite.
Yeah, HyperCore, which is an aggregator. They have VeloCloud solution as well, and I'm pretty sure they're offering co-management of the tools.
Mm-hmm. You said Granite uses HyperCore, or HyperCore is separate from Granite?
That's separate. So
Okay.
Granite is a POTS consolidator that also gets into DSL, T1s, and cable modem.
Mm-hmm.
And they've added VeloCloud as well.
Okay. Well, then moving on to Granite, you said VeloCloud.
Yeah, actually, you could put Sprint on. Everybody thinks of Sprint for cell phones, but they still have a robust global network as well, and they've added VeloCloud as well.
Okay. VeloCloud. And then finally, the master agencies. We've got every master agency, like the carriers, are saying, "Hey, we do this now. We're experts." Do you have any experience with any of these master agencies that we've listed, or are there master agencies not listed that you believe are pretty good at SD-WAN? Brad?
You'll definitely want to add Avant to this list.
Okay.
They have a very robust SD-WAN portfolio and focus more on that type of solution and cloud solutions than the Connect. Well, they do a lot of other stuff too, but you definitely need to have Avant on there. And then I work with 3 of the others on there as well for different situations.
Okay, which 3 can you say which 3?
Yep, I work with Telarus, WTG, and TBI.
Okay, Telarus and WTG and Star and TBI. Okay, and Greg, any master agency SD-WAN experiences you want to share?
Yeah, Telarus is our primary master agency. We're also with Intelisys, and WTG. We like Telarus the best. We always default to them because of the support. And of course, they represent multiple SD-WAN solutions that are all flavors of the above that we discussed.
Great. Now, in closing, I appreciate that. When you're talking to a client, and unless they come with you with a specific thing, hey, can you answer this question? Do you generally start by leading with a brand name of SD-WAN, or do you start first by, describing which of these 4 SD-WANs that they most would probably benefit from, path, session, packet, or cloud, or do you kind of skip those definitions, hardware or software, and do you lead with, these are the ones that most people are going with, say, Velo Cloud, and then which carrier does it best? Brad, we'll start with you.
I kind of explain the 4 different models and try to get some feedback on what the customer prefers, and then I'll go back and talk to them about where maybe their current hardware vendor fits. And what a lot of times I'm finding is that they're getting path selection, but they really want packet optimization. So that's how I'd open the conversation. Then from there, if they do want to move forward with a packet optimization solution, the 2 different options there that I look at the most would be an option where there's a cloud component where the provider has part of the solution is in their cloud, and then the other one would be all hardware based where the entire SD-WAN solution sits in the customer's offices. So with either solution, they're going to have a piece of equipment in all their offices, but the key is where's the controller, where's the orchestrator, where's the main piece of technology that's driving it, whether it's in their own data center or whether it's in the SD-WAN provider's data centers. And then from there, you can narrow it down to best of breed.
Okay, great. So you really start with their applications, figure out which flavor is best, and then take them into the brand names.
Yep.
And Greg, how do you do it similarly, or do you lead with the brand names, or you lead with the application, or the different type of SD-WAN?
No, of course you go through, listening to the client, then inventory what they have. They will have told you what they want, and then you do, a financial analysis, which is always a big driver, and then you do a benefits and efficiency analysis and make a recommendation. And that will dictate the type of equipment or service that you're going to use. And then, you have to look at how involved the customer wants to be. Some customers are hands-off and they say, Greg, we just want you guys to take care of everything, and we do. Others want to be intricately involved, so, we'll share with them all the technical information, make several solutions, and oftentimes they will, dictate which way that they want to go.
Great. This is Dan Baldwin, and today we've been talking to our SD-WAN subject matter experts, Brad Carroll with Strategic Telecom Partners in Kansas City, Missouri, and Greg Ottensmeyer of Telefonet out of Baltimore, Maryland. Gentlemen, we really appreciate your sharing with us. We'd like to finally close with just a lot of people watch this and say, oh, I got to do business with Brad, or oh, I got to do business with Greg. And I appreciate that you've spent 60 minutes with us here today. I know that you're terribly busy. What are the sorts of clients, and Brad, we'll start with you, that actually match up with you? I mean, do you do business with high-end businesses, low-end businesses? I mean, what kind of deals are the right fit for you?
Well, for me, definitely want customers that have an IT department, because
Hmm.
what we focus on is becoming part of their internal team and
Mhm.
helping them sort through all the carriers and all the stuff that they get told. And what I find is they find it hugely valuable to not have to deal with sorting through all that anymore. As long as, and the key component is they have to have somebody that they can trust,
Hmm.
that knows what they're doing. And um, so for us, we found that, I didn't get into it thinking this would be how it works out, but what I found is the larger the customer is, the more they value what we do than the smaller customers. The smaller ones tend to not understand, as much to the total value that we can bring to the table.
Hmm. And Greg, what are the sorts of clients that match up best with your business?
I agree. Some of the smaller clients don't appreciate us as much, Brad, but
Hmm.
hopefully they ultimately do. Um, um, we deal with larger clients. We deal with primarily SMBs, small medium business, and we're also making inroads into government contracts. So it covers the spectrum, and that's why we specialize in short tel from a phone perspective. Through the vendors, we have access to all the major carriers and most of the specialized carriers with good SD-WAN solutions. And we try to become intricately involved, trusted member of their team, and provide the technical competencies that we provide when they need it, and stay out of their way when they don't.
Great. This is Dan Baldwin, and again, we've been speaking with our SD-WAN subject matter experts, Brad Carroll and Greg Ottensmeyer. Brad and Greg, thanks for visiting with us today.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Thanks,
It's been a pleasure.
thanks for having us.
All right.
Appreciate it.
We'll talk to you again soon.
Take care.